and sober. It is episode 457. If you're here for the first time, welcome. And if you're back, hey, what's up? So glad you're here. I am really excited to have you guys meet today. Michael Le Buhn. Did I say it right?
There's
No. He said there's no right way. So there you go. And Michael is a chaplain. Michael served in the military. Michael is in recovery, and I feel really blessed today that he's here. By the way, if you guys like today's show, please hit subscribe and like wherever you're watching this or listening to this podcast today. So, Michael, welcome to the show. I'm so glad you're here.
Glad to be here.
It's amazing. So I want to hear, for one, what made you enlist in the military?
Oh, great question. So there's I have different versions of this story, but I'll say first of all, it's really a big part of my culture growing up. I grew up in a, like I would say lower middle class neighborhood and family, and there wasn't a whole lot of options. I didn't know a lot of people who went to college or anything like that. Um, but there's always this route that was always there in front of us, and that was the military. And this was sort of a way of doing something that like within our context in our culture was a way of doing something important with your life. Was a big part of it. Another big part of it was my grandfather was a World War II veteran.
Oh, wow.
And that meant a lot to me. I really cared a lot. He had some wild stories. He was a combat glider, which a lot of people don't even know what that is, but essentially aircrafts with no engine that they pulled behind airplanes, and then they would cut them loose, and with no engine they would guide these things behind enemy lines and fight. So yeah, my grandfather was one of my heroes. My father is another one of my heroes, and he spent considerable amount of time in the Navy. He really wanted me to join the Navy. If I was going to join anything, he wanted it to be the Navy, but I have a crippling fear of open water, so there was no way that I was going to do that. So yeah, I would say that was that was sort of the drive behind that. That was always kind of the soil, maybe, for me. And then after high school, I'd been working for a couple of years. Really couldn't get ahead, and I mean, I was pretty scared about my finances, and then I weirdly one night ran into this old man in Taco Bell, and he had a 82nd Airborne hat on, and I just thought, now's the time. I don't want to end up some old man with no hat, so I joined.
And where did you grow up? What city, what state?
Yeah, I usually say I kind of grew up on the run. So my father's a pastor, and he spent a lot of time. We moved from church to church, not like every year or anything, but before it was all said and done, I think I lived in 7 different states, and so I grew up kind of all over the place. But I usually claim Arkansas. That's the place where I was born, and lived in different cities in Arkansas and towns in Arkansas until I was 10 years old, and then we moved to Illinois, about an hour south of Chicago. That's where I went to junior high and high school.
But it's so interesting that you did mention that it was part of your culture, because for a very long time, it's up until, I swear right now, that we're living in these crazy times that nobody wants to really serve. Nobody's signing up. And I just heard on the podcast, I can't remember whose it was, probably Sean Ryan, who is, I don't know if you know who Sean Ryan is. He's an ex-Navy SEAL. And he said that nobody wants to sign up because of that fear factor, that people are scared they're going to die, and all the crazy stuff that's gone on of recent years of having, you have to get vaxxed, you have to do this, you have to do that. And a lot of people are saying, no, I'm not going to do that. And then you have to wear an LGBTQ, pin now. I just heard that yesterday. If you're in the military, it doesn't even matter if you agree with it or not, you have to do it. It was kind of interesting, I found. But
it doesn't sound true. I think that a big thing I know, so I'm friends with a lot of Army recruiters. And they'll be the first to tell you that they'll gladly accept assignments in places that are economically disadvantaged. Because they have no problem making their numbers. But the more, the higher the economic, so like the socioeconomic status of whatever their placement is, the harder it is for them to make their numbers. I think this is
Really?
probably always been about choices. So when you asked me about my story, it started off with no choices. I didn't have a lot of choices. I didn't have a lot of options. And I'm not saying that that's why everybody does it. What I'm saying is straight across the board. If you have a pool of people who don't know how they're going to go to college, then you have a certain percentage of those people who will be willing to join the military. If you have a pool of people who have, trust funds, I mean, I was in the Army a long time. I spent 8 years active duty. I didn't meet one rich person. So I think that we live in a world where we have more information now, and for sure that's part of
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Different stories versus seeing the carnage uh, on a video, But so I think that certainly that all of this stuff has to play a factor. But I think the same old things that always played a factor probably still do.
I love that you're clarifying this for us because you have been on the ground and I literally can't thank you enough because, people will say to me sometimes I'm courageous on my podcast because I talk about my sobriety. I talk about my faith. I talk about my relationship with God.
Mm.
But I feel like you guys that actually go out there and it brings me to tears that fight for our country are absolutely, the ones that are the real courageous ones. So I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for everything you did. And you put yourself in, you had no idea that you were going to be shipped off right away, did you?
No, I had no idea. So I had these like high aspirations. I found this really cool job. It was a Cav Scout. And then whenever I got to, it's called MEPS. When I got to MEPS, they make you take all these tests and stuff. It's kind of funny, the test, but they show me this card and they say, "What's the number in this card?" And I thought they were trying to see if I would lie because there was no number in that card. It was like a card with a circle, and that was it, no number. And I was like, "Ha, there's no number." I'd seen Star Trek. I knew the Borg. So I was like, "No, there's no number in that card." Well, they keep going, card after card, and then I'm like, I think I misunderstand this. And I start realizing that there must be numbers in these cards and I'm just not seeing them. So then I did start to lie. I was like, oh, there's a six, and so finally uh I saw one and I really did see a number, like plain as day, the number seven. And I was like, that one has a number seven. And the sergeant who was running the test, he said, you only see seven if you're colorblind. And this is the way that I found out that I was colorblind. I had no idea. Um, so my jobs went from like over 200 jobs to choose from to like exactly 4 jobs that I could choose from, and Cav Scout was not one of them. So I ended up with an MOS that was finance, and I didn't know anything about finance or anything about the military, but I thought, well, that sounds like maybe I won't be deployed right away. It's not the case. As soon as I got to Fort Hood, a sergeant major told me, "Don't even unpack your bags." He said, "Did you bring anybody with you?" I said, "Yeah, my spouse." He said, "Send your spouse back to their mother. Don't like don't don't move in here. We're going to Iraq." And it wasn't quite that fast, but it was that year. I got there in I want to say I got there in late February to Fort Hood, and by October I was in Iraq. So
Oh my gosh. And how old were you?
this would have been 2006, so I would have been 22.
Oh my gosh, a baby with a wife. I mean, 22
Yeah.
is a baby, like literally, and you have no idea. And you go, I mean, I guess in some ways, only having 4 jobs to choose from rather than a plethora of 200s probably, isn't that a little bit easier?
Well, it was really easy for me because the jobs were laundry and textile services was one of them. I remember combat medic was another, and I didn't have any interest in blood and stuff. And I don't remember the third one, and the fourth one was finance. It really was one job. Like the way I read it, I was like, this is one job. This I have exactly one option.
And what did your wife say? I mean, she's probably like, "Oh my, how long had you been married?"
Yeah, we'd been married for I suppose, so we got married in '04. So this would have been just shy of yeah, well, but I joined in '05. So we'd been married like a little over a year. She was pretty baffled by the whole thing. She was raised in a decidedly different culture than me. So where I didn't know anybody who had gone to college. She didn't know anybody who had joined the military. Her whole world was people who had gone to college. And so she was supportive, but I don't think she ever could really wrap her mind around why the military was an option for me uh, at all. And so, no, she was scared to death by all of it.
I'm sure. And then you're like, all right, and bye. I'm going to someplace I can't really tell you where I'm going. I can't really, there's no phone. I mean, did you get to take a cell phone? No.
We didn't have cell phones over there back then. I mean, some folks did, but they were stationed in different places than I was in Iraq. No, what I had was cards. You know, the I can't remember exactly what they're called, but yeah, I would have a card that you could load money on, and then but it took so long just to get a line out took forever, and then you never knew when the call was just going to drop. My mother set up a 1-800 number for her landline
Oh,
so that I could just call a 1-800 number from downrange and it would ring at her house. she
oh
was
my gosh. That's amazing. I can
she was
see doing
sorry.
that. I can see doing that. You're her baby. She's like, wait
That's
a minute. We'll go to any lengths to talk to you guys. That's amazing. And so, because you think, I mean, at least in movies, right? They say people enlist because they want to support America, but the reality is you don't always have that choice of being able to do whatever you want to do.
right. Yeah. I mean, I don't get me wrong. Patriotism was no small part of my identity. It was just, but I think that you're only there for 5 minutes before you realize that the reason that you get up every day, the reason that you go on, what drove me. I was in combat for 15 months. The thing that makes you keep going is really your sense of loyalty and duty to your unit and to the people that you're with, and you care about them and you want them to be safe and you want to do anything you can to keep them safe, and they feel the same way about you. And so that really, I mean, they all say it in the movies. It's almost cliche, but it's one of those cliches that really are true. I feel the same thing about one day at a time. Like
Yeah.
it's a cliche, and it's exactly how I live my life. Yeah.
Yeah. 15 months. Wow. Wow. Was it? And that's when you really started to drink.
So yeah, before I left for Iraq, it was so common for me to have, I would drink, but it wasn't a part of my life. I remember regularly I would have a 6 pack of beer that would just stay in my refrigerator forever. Like I mean months. I just, I didn't care much for it. Just once in a while I'd want, and I almost never finished a whole beer. I just kind of have it after dinner or something once in a while. But I had no desire to drink a lot. It just didn't occur to me. Never had more than one in a sitting. Um, and it was like the day I got home from Iraq, which I mean, looking back on it, there was a lot of factors there. Not only had I been traumatized for 15 months straight, it's not just like one traumatizing experience. It's every experience. And but I'd been wounded in combat, and then you come back and the whole world has changed, and you've changed even more, and everything is unfamiliar, everything. And so yes, that was when my drinking started. It was the day I got back from Iraq.
It's so fascinating to me because I listen to I listen to podcasts, or I listen to ex-military. I've been sober for, God willing, I'll be 18 years in August. And I think back to so many people that were in the military that they I can't even imagine like going and being put in a place for one you've never been to. You're in the sand somewhere in Iraq. You have no idea where you are. It doesn't look anything like where you were from in America.
Mm.
And you get there and it's fear all around you. And then, okay, it's done. Now go home and go eat dinner with your wife and go to the baseball game and enjoy
Right,
life. And you're like, wait a minute. Are we gonna pretend like what I just saw for the past, 15 months didn't really exist?
right. Yeah, and there's something else too, and that's that, like, you have this, you just you get this, as Americans, we're raised with this safety that's like ingrained in us. It's the setting of our lives is safety. And I don't mean to say that like we don't have violence here, trust me, I grew up in a, place where that was not uncommon to read about, to know people who horrible things had happened to know people whose family members had been murdered. That wasn't like, I wouldn't say it was common, but I can tell you, I can think of their names right now. Um, so I'm not saying there's not violence, but those stories stood out because they were exceptions. Um, to go to a place where the at any time, anything can happen, and violence is the setting. So then you come back, and you're not only do you have these memories, but you also just have this like, I had this unsettled feeling constantly, just always. Um, that foundation of safety that I proceeded from for all of the times before that was gone. And it's not gone for everybody else. And so that was a really difficult part of it, is the ground shifted inside of me too. And then you try to, it's like trying to force a square peg into a round hole when you try to come back and make your life make sense.
I can't even imagine. And now at this point, was your grandfather still alive?
No, grandpa died in 1995. So
Okay.
he died when I was a little boy, which sort of canonized him in
Yeah.
my in
Yeah.
my in my world.
I'm sure. But you think, gosh, could you come back and talk to your dad? Like, was that available? Because had he seen combat, your dad? No.
Dad hadn't seen combat, and unfortunately, when it came to this, I was a pretty stereotypical veteran.
Yeah.
I was still a soldier, but a stereotypical soldier. Um, I don't think I knew I needed help. And I don't think I knew how bothered I was. And then anytime that I was aware, it didn't occur to me to try to talk to anyone. I would say even still, this is a struggle for me.
Right
I have
now.
to really push myself to talk about my problems, to talk about what's hard. Yeah.
My
And I'm a
gosh.
chaplain, but my whole job is to get people to talk about what's
I know.
hard. But I'm a better chaplain than I am a patient, I think.
Well, it's interesting. It's like the shoe cobbler never had really nice shoes, right? So let's be honest. I mean, but it makes so much sense. And I think that as men, and I do believe men and women are completely different. I have sons and I have daughter. And I think that men are more stoic. And, I don't know if it's in your genes or what it is, but that you're like, you got to get out there. You got to be strong. You got to save the family. And I'm not going to sit here and complain. I'm going to fix things. I'm going to make everything okay, but you're not really that broken. Look, I don't have a broken leg. I'm okay. I can get to work. I can do my stuff and I can come home. But the stuff that's inside of us, and we want, and I know, I mean, I've never been to war, but that whole thing of trauma and just wanting the feelings to go away. I
Yeah,
can identify that so much as having that feeling like, oh my gosh, when you have that sip and you're like, everything's gone. I'm okay. For a second. I think it's
yeah.
only a second though that we have it, and then we're spending the rest of the time chasing that buzz. But I mean, but we find the answer in alcohol and it's legal, right? So and everybody does it.
Yeah, you talked about a couple things there. First of all, as far as like the differences of men and women, I've only ever been me, but I do know that um, the social expectations are certainly different.
Mhm.
And that I know has played a huge role in my life. And one big thing that I think matters a lot about this is what emotions are permissible.
Mm.
And so fear is something that I have felt every day of my life. I've been afraid every day of my life. I've been afraid like 6 times since this interview started. Um, I just think it's just a very accessible feeling for me. I can always reach out and touch fear. Um, but I grew up, even though I'm 40 years old, but the culture I was raised in, I think was always a little like 20 years behind everybody else, you know. And so, um, yeah, I grew up in this place where anger was always permitted. Happy, I could always be happy. I could always be angry, and I could be sad in the right context.
Mm.
But to be scared, or to be embarrassed, it was very embarrassing to be embarrassed. You know, these were feelings that weren't allowed. And so, I have a son, and daily I talk to him about his feelings. I ask him what he's feeling, and he's little, but he'll name one, and then I'll say, what else? And just a few nights ago, he was at my mother's, and I said, how are you feeling? And he said, I feel happy. And I said, what else do you feel? And it was quiet. And then he said, I feel a little bit scared. And I said, why do you feel scared? And he said, because of the storm. And I didn't even know there was a storm, you know? And I just told him it's okay to feel scared. And then I told him that his grandmother kept me safe through, you know, all the storms that happened. And here I am, you know, and I'm talking to a 5-year-old. I'm an old man, you know. They said, here I am, an old man. I made it all the way to being an old man. So I think you're going to be okay. But I loved it that he was able to say it. I hope he's always able to say it. Then the other thing you talked about was how common alcohol is. And this, I think, was maybe one of the biggest factors. Um, Even though I was raised in a really strict religious setting. So none of those folks that I grew up around, none of the church people I knew drank. I mean, but they had this really clear reason why they didn't drink, because it was prohibited by their religion. Um, and then I was in the military where everybody drank, and it never, you know. So like I said, I got back and I spent 4 more years in the military, and I don't think it didn't really. I wasn't living in a way that was countercultural in the military.
Mm.
Drinking
Mm-mm.
like I was, didn't raise any red flags. I just, you know, liked to party. And so that wasn't a problem. I remember when I got out of the military, meeting a couple who I'm still really close with. We're still really good friends with them. And they didn't drink. And I was like, oh, they must be religious. And no, they are religious, but they belong to a religion where drinking is permissible. Um, so I thought, oh, they must be alcoholics. No, that wasn't it either. And I remember being baffled, and it came up so many times. I would say, "Why? But why don't you drink?" And we just don't want to, don't like it. I couldn't wrap my head around that. You know, and it is so normal in the military, in academia. When I was in academia, the orientation, there's wine and cheese. Um, Business, there's so many business settings where, you know, going to happy hour afterwards, a lot of business gets done there. Yeah, the way that it is stitched into our culture, this, I mean, it's poison that makes you feel good if you drink a little bit of it. And as a culture, we just go, yeah, this is okay. No matter how many people die every year because of DUIs, no matter how much domestic violence is sparked because of this substance, no matter how many people get hospitalized, no matter how many people die of alcohol poisoning and liver disease, it just we just keep right on going.
I mean, I have so many things I want to bring up now. It's crazy. For one, you were raised with a father who was a preacher. You are now in obviously, you know, a follower of Jesus, and you brought up fear a lot. And one of my favorite lines in the Bible is fear without faith is dead, right? And
The scriptures, faith without works is
faith
dead.
without work. I got it wrong. I'm sorry.
Maybe
Faith
God has
without
not given us a spirit of fear
right.
would be a really like pertinent scripture for, yeah, for someone
Yeah.
who says, yeah, I feel a lot of fear.
And I didn't realize, and for me personally, I didn't realize, I knew that so I raised my kids and spent a lot of my time in Pennsylvania before moving to Florida. And it's called the Wine and Spirits Store. And I'd
Mhm.
be like, Well, what is that? And my grandmother, when she was, still here, God rest her soul, she'd be like, "Oh, we're gonna go get a basket of cheer," and I'm like, "Well, wait a minute, what's a basket of cheer?" And the cheer would be alcohol, right?
Yeah.
And then the spirit store. And the longer that I've been, researching and everything, it's a spirit that we are putting in. It's a spirit, right? It changes our body. It changes our mind. We don't have the faculties that we have when we're normal, even if you've had one drink. Like if you get behind the wheel of a car, a cat, a dog, a child, another human being, well, I mean, you're just not going to react like you normally would you?
Right.
And then on top of that, it's like you make these choices and these decisions after you've had some, and you can't really make a great choice when you've even had a little bit of alcohol. But we all say it's great. Come on, have one. You watch a football game, watch any football game, go drink this, go drink that. And the other side of the coin, which is why I even started doing this in the beginning. When I first started doing this, it was called Sober Not Ashamed,
Mm.
because I had so much shame associated with my addiction. I was a blackout drinker. It was
Yeah.
the best medicine I could ever get, right? It was like, oh my gosh, and all I have to do is go down the street or go to a bar or go to a party. Everybody's doing it. I don't look weird. Like, and there's other people that are getting just as drunk as I am, right?
Right. Right.
Right? But it's okay. It's okay. But what it does to us at the end of the day is it takes us away from us.
That's exactly right. I was when I went to college on the post 9/11 GI Bill, and I really wanted to understand what had happened to me. I knew I was different, and by this time I'd been in therapy for quite some time, and I was beginning my healing journey. So I was at the University of Illinois in Champaign, and I was studying psychology. Back then, they didn't have a neuroscience program. I was studying psychology with an emphasis in neuroscience. It was any neuroscience class I could get out. That's really why I was studying it. I wanted to know. I wanted to know as much about the brain as possible. In fact, I ended up with a bachelor's of science in psychology with an emphasis in neuroscience and a bachelor's of arts in philosophy. I was
Oh,
very interested in
cool.
the human experience and what it means to be human. Learning about alcohol and what it does to the brain is unsettling. So the diminished activity in the prefrontal cortex, being what they call the CEO of the brain. Right? It's where we are able to understand risks, and where we're able to understand cost, where we're able to understand like, oh, if I do this, then these other things might happen. And it's also where I'm able to put myself in your shoes, and I'm able to go, oh, she probably feels bad right now because I said something nasty. Uh, all of that, all of those really important things that really make us who we are. Uh, yeah, very, very much diminished activity in the prefrontal cortex. And thinking about that, and then thinking about like every drunk I ever met had the experience of having to, you know, of having to cash the checks that the drunk version of them had written the night before,
Yeah.
like it was like, oh, I have to cover those checks that guy wrote last night, and I would never do that sober. Um, well, yeah, there's a real physical reason why, and it's because of the effect of GABA, this neurotransmitter that is associated with alcohol. Learning about it was it just made me understand all the things that I had done in all those years that I was drinking so heavily, and really scratch my head and go, wow, this is it's makes you think it's even more strange that we so readily accept this in our society and our culture as okay, not just okay, but good, celebrated.
It's crazy. I feel like it's so crazy. And especially during COVID, I was like, because I know more people that died of alcoholism that died of COVID. I mean, people falling in their houses, people doing things, I I mean, the pain that people have been, going through since then, the isolation and knowing that you couldn't go and meet with your friends at either a meeting or at your church or your synagogue or your mosque and go be with your people, which is what God made us be around other people. I think like we're supposed to be together, which is where the joy comes and the love comes from. And when you took that all away, but I could still call and have alcohol delivered to my house or go to
Right.
the grocery store. What are you trying to tell us? What are you trying to do to our society? It's kind of crazy.
Yeah, so I'm a hospital chaplain at a metropolitan hospital, and I'm in leadership now, but during COVID I was patient facing, and I can tell you I saw a lot more people die of COVID than I saw die of alcohol related illnesses, but I definitely saw deaths from alcohol related illnesses go way up, and this is something that just I couldn't be ignored. We talked about it a lot because these units that would see usually maybe one patient like this a month or two a month, suddenly it was just a common occurrence to have people younger and younger and younger. Some of the hardest patient deaths that I saw that weren't COVID related were people who died of liver failure before they reached 30 years old. And um, and my mind would be I would be trying to wrap my head around this because I can't hardly imagine anybody drinking more than I drank when I was in active addiction.
Hmm. Hmm.
Uh, I just can't even imagine that. But a couple things I learned, one is that maybe they didn't have to drink more quantity than I did. A lot of it comes down to biology, and none of us really know, right? Like how much can your liver take? We don't know. Uh, that part was really really hard, and it was scary to see that, and so devastatingly sad, um, to see people's lives cut so short, um, and
Well,
and our culture continues, and it all goes on.
it's so interesting. I found it really. I've mentioned this before on my podcast, I think, but I still attend 12-step meetings, and I went to a meeting down the street. I live in Delray Beach, Florida, so there's a large, there's a lot of rehabs here, a lot of halfway houses, that sort of thing. And I went to a meeting and it was all women, and it's young women, like not even 21, like not 25, like young. And they're all talking about a friend they've lost or a relative that they've lost due to either addiction of alcohol or fentanyl or heroin, right?
Yeah.
And you're looking at these people that are so their brain isn't even fully developed at this point, and
Right.
they're talking about death. Where I think, I was born in 60, I'm 55, so I'm 15 years older than you. Like, I didn't know anybody who had died besides my grandparents that were, older, right? That they were old. It was norm, right? They're older, whatever, that's they're two generations ahead of us, right? That it was kind of the rite of passage. But to imagine being young today and losing your friend and being like, does that, like, how do you make sense of that? Like, that's where I think it's so fascinating to me that we're living in this world with such darkness and such things that, like, mentally that are and emotionally that people are dealing with it's unfathomable. It's like, how do you even put words to it? How do you explain that? How does a kid even feel those feelings of remorse, sadness, what life really is worth, and what the feelings are that you have about that? Like, you've only lived to be 20, you've only lived to be 18.
Yeah. Yeah. I had I, my experiences are different. I don't remember my first encounter with death, but I know I lost a close friend when I was 11. He was 11, and junior high and then high school, there were kids who died uh, by suicide, and that so and like I said, violence was present. Um, from my own experience, I can tell you that these are some of the most formative experiences of my life. And then in my early 20s, I went to war where death was everywhere. Um, I think that I have a 13-year-old daughter, and I she's got this bright light. She's an old soul, but she's not a sad one. You know, she has this wisdom, but her wisdom is rooted in joy and not pain. And I set out when she was born. I could see it already in this little infant. And I set out, I thought, okay, if I get everything else wrong, everything else wrong, if I can just protect this this person, this light in this person, if I can keep trauma away, certainly she'll have some reason to pay a therapist when she's an adult. Make no mistake. And I'm sure like part of it'll be me. But you know what I mean? The real, like the violence, the that kind of earth-shattering trauma, if I can keep that stuff away as best I can, if we can protect this just for a little while. I can't control what kind of adult life she has, but I can work hard to give her the best childhood that I can. And every year her birthday's coming up, and every year I look at her and I go, God, it's still there, you know, um, because I don't know what I would be like had my friend not died when I was 11, had I not lived the life that I lived, had I not gone to war. I have no idea. But I want Parker to say the exact opposite. I want my daughter to say, I don't know what it would have been like to have been, to have seen that kind of violence. I don't know what I would be like if I had seen war. So, so I I hear you, and I don't think I metabolized that death very well. I became a musician when I was young, and the first song I ever wrote was about my grandfather dying. The second song that I wrote was about my best friend dying. And these were, I was like 14, 15-year-old kid, and this is what I have to say. This is the words I want to put to music.
Mm.
I think Parker would write about like manga, or anime or something, you know. And that's what I want, you know. That's what I
Oh,
want for my loved ones.
of course. And I want to kind of like pivot a little bit to where, so did you attend 12-step meetings? Is that where no, no.
I didn't. No,
I
no,
love
I
that. I
didn't.
love that there's different ways because I love that we're talking about this. Okay, go on, please.
I didn't attend 12-step meetings. Um, and I will say I have so many people in my life who have been able to wrest their lives back through 12-step meetings and AA and Narcotics Anonymous and all these other really, really beautiful, wonderful programs. But that was not my path to sobriety. Mhm.
What was it?
I heard someone say one time that people only change when it's more uncomfortable to stay the same than it is to change.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, that really rang true for me.
Hmm.
I would say that the way the what happened with me is my drinking, when I got out of the military, is when I started realizing that I really started realizing that, yeah, I have a problem. Um, there were clues before. I Googled like how much is too much. Like I thought maybe there was like how many drinks can I have without becoming an alcoholic? Yeah, I tried to do my research, uh, and that was not helpful. And then I remember when I was in the army, I asked my doctor. I said, "Hey, can you give me a number?" Because Google didn't work. So I said, "Hey, can you give me a number? Like how much drinking is too much drinking? How will I know if I'm drinking too much?" And the doctor, military doctor, he goes, "You're drinking too much." And I said, "I didn't even tell you how much I'm drinking." He said, "Well, people who aren't drinking too much don't ask me that question. So if you're asking me that question, you're drinking too much." And so I mean, there were clues, right? It wasn't I wasn't shocked. But but when I got out of the military and I was around all these different kinds of people, people who didn't drink, people who or people who drank but would just have two or three and then say, that's it, I'm done. And I better take an Uber. I had two drinks, and just very different people than I had been around for the last 8 years. I started realizing, okay, I don't think these people ever have to take a shot of whiskey so that they can choke down their breakfast. I think they're living different than me. And then in my I was sort of my life was on this kind of crescendo of building and building, and all of my problems were mounting, and they were getting bigger and bigger and bigger. I was running. uh you start off chasing the dragon, trying to chase that buzz, and then you just start running from your mistakes. And I mean, I think my experience is like so many people's experience who live with addiction. um and finally, it all that whole wave that had swelled and swelled and swelled, white capped, all came crashing down. And what that looked like for me was almost a complete social death, where every significant relationship in my life was impacted. Most of my relationships ended. Um, my my family stayed with me, and a couple of friends, I can count them on one hand, who stayed. Um, Everybody else either spit on the ground when they said my name or pretended like they didn't know me. And when that happened, and everything got so dark and so bad. And I realized in a moment of clarity that I am at a fork in the road, and there are two paths ahead of me. One is I can fight and live, or I need to make peace with my own death and understand that it is imminent. And I already had this little girl.
I was gonna say, yeah.
So I started, and this, it didn't feel to me like it was a question of drinking or not drinking. It felt like it was a question of, what do I do now that the sky has fallen, the world has ended around me, and now what do I do? And luckily, the VA hospital exists, because I didn't have a job, and I don't know what I would have done. I can't even imagine what would have become of me had it not been for the VA hospital. So I went to the VA and I said, I think I need some help. And I met with this amazing social worker named and therapist, and her name was Hillary. And Hillary was sort of, didn't suffer fools, and was not going to beat around the bush for anything at all. Fit in very well in the sort of hard culture that was the town I grew up in. Uh, she was fantastic, and she said some hard truths to me, and so I was in therapy twice a week through the VA, and then once a week. And we did these long programs, and they really addressed my PTSD. I was diagnosed with severe post-traumatic stress disorder, and through that process. And so then I started to learn more, and I'd already started college. I was in community college when this all started, and then I got into the University of Illinois from there. And so I really became interested in learning. For me, this all came down to learning then. And so I knew I couldn't just patch things up and fix things that were broken. But I knew that I could start working on me, and I could start learning and exploring and understanding more. And I thought, the more I understand, then the more agency I'll have, and the more intentional I can be about the kind of life I want to live moving forward. And so therapy through the VA, the loving support of my family. I mean, there was a time where my mom and dad took turns coming to stay at the house so that I wouldn't be alone. And they didn't live close. They lived 4 hours away. And they just took turns staying with me, holding my hand, you know. So I've worked with a lot of patients who live with substance abuse disorder. As a chaplain, I'm not a therapist, but the one question that I usually want to come to is, I know that every addiction starts the same way, pain. And so my question is always, what are we going to do about that pain? And that's where that's where my healing journey began. It didn't begin with a 12-step program, which I know is so healing for so many people and may have been really healing for me. It's just not the path. Just wasn't my path. But I was fortunate to have people who were present with my pain, and then a therapist and a hospital system that supported me, to help me start to navigate that pain.
What a beautiful story. And you are so blessed to have the parents you have. Wow. How
I
lucky are you? I mean, really, I mean, you picked the right parents. You're so blessed. That is amazing. How many people have parents that would do that? You're so lucky.
Just me and my sister are the only ones. Yeah.
Your sister, I bet, is just as lucky as you are. I'm like tearing up, you guys. Um, I believe that the spiritual component, which it sounds like you've had a relationship with God your entire life. Is that true?
Oh, without a doubt. Yeah. Yeah. I like to say I was Christian, long for 100 years before I was born. That was the Christianity was my is my birthright. That's what my family passed on to me. Yeah, there wasn't any money, but but they gave me plenty of religion. Yeah.
Wow, it's so funny you brought up the money thing because I wonder so much these days because there is so much. It's all about the glam, it's all about the material, it's all about this outside stuff. And in reality, what we all need is more God, I think, and less of the material stuff because I can tell you when I'm praying and I'm getting on my knees and I'm living a life where I'm like reading the Bible and listening to it every morning, my life is like amazing, like so amazing. And it's not even anything really, you know what I mean? I just acknowledge him and I say thank you. And I'm like, guide me today, speak through me today. And when I do that, all this other stuff doesn't even really matter, to be honest. It's like, thank you. Like you've given me life and you've given me these gifts, right? My family, my husband, my children. I'm just like, if that's all I have, like that's amazing in my sobriety. I mean, this hasn't been me, right? It's God that's got helped me stay sober this through my life. And I've heard so many people talk about that. Like it's the spiritual. I mean, I love Dr. Jordan Peterson. I'm sure you know who Dr. Jordan Peterson is, do you?
I know of him.
You know of him. I don't know him either personally. I'd love to meet him though. But he always talks about like one of the main components to staying and keeping long-term sobriety is having that relationship with God, having faith in something bigger than you.
We talk a lot in spiritual care, which is the department in the hospital that I work in, about spirituality and how important meaning and purpose are. I think that this is you mentioned gratitude. Gratitude, what an incredible resource. I don't even know if you knew exactly how you went from there, but you talked about, all of these things, your life, your worries, and then through your spiritual practices, you come to a place of gratitude. And you said, and then I feel, oh, thank you, just thank you, right? And that's how you said it. But what I heard there, what pinged for me, is this truth that I've come to, that I've never been grateful and afraid at the same time.
Mhm.
Never. I've never been grateful and afraid. Now, sometimes it's been like a switch between gratitude and fear. And I can toggle back and forth, no problem. But yeah, we talk a lot about meaning. How are you making meaning of your life, and where are you finding purpose? And meaning to me is about how I am contextualizing the past,
Mm,
and how do I bring the past into the present. I'm doing that right now with you. I'm talking about some of the hardest parts of my life in hope that someone listening will be moved toward sobriety, moved toward the light, moved toward hope, moved toward gratitude. And that helps me make sense of what were some very painful, very dark days. And I think that helps me heal. And on the other thing is purpose, and purpose is about how am I picturing the future, and how do I see myself in that future, and what am I doing today to lead to that future. This is Those two things are inextricably bound up in human spirituality. I think
mm,
that I think that we share this. All human beings share this need for meaning, this need for purpose. And I think that when we have those in excess, then I think our odds of living a sober life are exponentially higher.
I agree 100%. I mean, if I didn't give this away, I couldn't keep it, right? And the longer I stay sober, the longer I've been away from a drink, that's what I'm going to say. Because some days, I'm not always the best, let's be honest. I'm human. But the longer that I've been on this journey, the more I'm realizing like life is so beautiful. Like
Mm.
there are so many beauties. And I spent a lot of time, and you talked about fear. And I don't know, because I'm 55, and let's face it, I'm closer to the back nine than I am to the front nine. And and experiences I've had of late have really shown me that fear is like such a waste of my time in so many ways. Because if I look at my gifts each and every day, like if I just take 5 minutes sometimes when I go down those dark rabbit holes, which I will sometimes, and then I got to remember, wait a minute, get back to where you are, Elizabeth. You haven't picked up a drink today.
Yeah, right.
Just today. Oh my gosh. Thank you. Thank you. That changes everything, right? Changes everything. I mentioned the other day on a podcast, I said, I gave myself little presents in the beginning when I was in my first year. If I
Mhm.
get a month, I'd be like, I'm going to buy myself, like, even if it's a lipstick or whatever it is, like a little pair of cheap earrings, whatever it was, but
Yeah.
like a little something that was like, oh my gosh. And I always remember to thank God at night before I went to sleep for not picking up a drink that day.
Mm.
You know, and then the longer you go on, sometimes it can be harder, right? To stay sober because you're like, wait a minute, I got this. Do I really even remember how bad it was?
Yeah.
Right?
Oh yeah. Yeah, I
But
know that. Yeah.
I could see that when you went back earlier, and thank you for doing this, and thank you for being so honest with us today, because you did go back and you did remember, wait a minute, I don't want to do that again. I don't want to lose me. That
Yeah, that
light.
and my journey hasn't been without interruption. After a couple of years of sobriety, but I never in those couple of years, I wasn't an addict. Okay, this wasn't the story I told myself, right? I was like, I just needed to take a break. And that's the way I really approached it in the beginning. Um, and what happened was I moved. I went to graduate school, and moved to Nashville. I went to grad school at Vanderbilt. And it was like the first weekend I was there, I went to this comedy show. There was a 2 drink minimum. And I thought, wow, I'm not like I used to be. And right.
Scary, scary. That's so scary to me. My
So to me too now. At the time though, it just seemed intuitively true. And so I that night I had 2 Guinness, and for a good long stretch, I told myself I'll just never have more than 2 in a night. Um, and then, I don't even, I'm assuming that probably most of your listeners, I don't have to explain what happened next,
Yeah.
right? It just increased and increased and increased. And then one morning I woke up and I couldn't remember the Uber ride home, right? I just,
Hmm.
and I was like, oh no, I can't kid myself. I didn't willfully choose to do this. Uh, this is something that I just have to now I have to come to terms with it. And I have to say, I'm not in control of this. I'm a passenger here. And, and so that was the moment that I really accepted. Okay, this is, uh, this is, this is not something that I can't drink at all. That's the way that my life has to be. And, and that felt really overwhelming. And this is when one day at a time started to come in to matter so much, right? And you talked about buying yourself little presents when you made it a month, made it 2 months. This is when I started counting, right? This is when I really started counting. And just recently, it was Father's Day. Uh, my kids got me all these pastries and sweet treats, and I really tried to avoid taking too much sugar and carbs.
Yeah.
Got me these little miniature cinnamon rolls. They're delicious. They're only okay if you eat it all in one bite, but if you eat the bread around the outside first, oh, then they're fantastic, right? So it was like the seventh one of those I was eating, and I start to feel a little bit of shame about, well, how much sugar am I eating right now? How many carbs am I taking? How much am I going to have? How much time am I going to have to row on the row machine to work these calories off? You know, and I popped it in, and I said out loud, "Every day I don't drink is a victory." Yeah, I meant it. Yeah. So I think it is really important. I think it is really important to be grateful. I think it's important to accept and hold that our pain has to be acknowledged and it has to be held, and our grief cries out for a witness. And these things, understanding that we have to metabolize our pain, we have to hold on to gratitude. And you talked about fear. Fear. You know, I told you I studied psychology and neuroscience. Fear does serve a purpose. Um, it's our brains trying to save us, constructing scary futures to say avoid that. Don't do that. The the thing I had to learn was that I had to learn that just because that feeling can be so overwhelming, and just because this scary picture that I'm painting of the future can be so immersive and all consuming, it doesn't mean that it's going to happen. It doesn't mean that hope is not valid. It doesn't mean that I'm without choices or that I'm powerless. It doesn't mean that I have no reason to be grateful. It doesn't mean that I have to throw up my hands and and sprint toward oblivion like I did when I was drinking.
Hmm.
It means that I want to live, that my body, my brain, my spirit wants to live and does everything it can to protect me, even painting scary pictures of the future so I'll know what to avoid. And that's a reason to be grateful. And see, now I've done
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
from fear to gratitude.
It's been such a pleasure getting to know you. You're amazing. You're amazing. Have you written a book yet?
No, no, I have not written any books yet.
You need to write a book. I don't know. I keep I don't know. I just feel like you need to write a book. I mean, with all your wisdom, I mean, you are just a plethora of wisdom and joy, and your kids are lucky to have you as their dad, and your patients and the people that work in the hospital are lucky to have you there because you are sharing the light that Parker has. And that's a huge, huge gift. And I can't tell you how much how great it's been getting to know you today. Thank you so much, Michael. You've been
Thank
amazing. You've
you. It's
been
really been an
amazing.
honor talking with you. Thank you so much.
You're amazing. Thank you so much for coming on. And I'm sending big hugs and love towards you and blessings to you and your family. And gosh, I want to give your mom a hug because she sounds amazing. She sounds so awesome.
Oh, the two of you would be fast friends for sure. No doubt.
She sounds awesome. Well, you guys, you're gonna find out all the information to reach Michael in the description. Please go and check that out. And if you enjoyed today's show, please subscribe and share it with your friends. And keep getting busy living sober, you guys. And again, thank you so much, Michael. It's been a pleasure having you on. Okay, everybody, until next time, keep getting busy living sober. Take care, everybody. Bye. Trying to find my staff. There's my staff. Bye, everybody.